All right. We are live, I think. All right. We'll see as people come in here. Let me get my technology working correctly. Sometimes that's a little difficult. But if you have questions, if you're coming into the chat and you've got questions, throw them into the chat. Also, let me know where you're joining from. I always like to hear where everyone's at. It's kind of cool to see people from all over the place. And I'm looking in two different cameras, so I apologize. I've got multiple streams going here. But if you got questions, throw them in there. I'd love to hear from you. Hey there, we got someone from Colorado, right on. Lots of people joining, just probably waiting to hear what I'm going to say. But if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. Anything about fatherhood, anything about I'll do my best to answer your questions. I like to preface that I like to speak from experience if I can. And some people ask some questions that are awesome questions, but I don't always have the answer. And that's okay. I'll admit when I don't have the answer. So we've got a question here. I can't read the name. I'm sorry. My phone is too far away. But what's the best way to discipline a rebellious child? Well, first I'd want to know how old the child is. And a lot of times we use the term discipline, and it's not a wonderful way to look at, I shouldn't say wonderful. It's not the best way of looking at it. Let me know how old the child is. That will be helpful. Discipline in itself, I like to think of myself as a coach instead. How can I assist in teaching my child, to do things the right way, or to do things in a respectful way and such. So 5 years old. Okay. So the child, rebellion at 5, there's probably a lot of things that are going on. Obviously the first four years of their life were in a certain way. But as a 5-year-old is going to be like pushing the limits. They're, often they can be whiny. But a lot of it is tending to their emotional needs and figuring out what is going on with the child. And a lot of time, rebellion is really sometimes their way of expressing their emotions. And so there could be an unmet need. The child could be very frustrated. I'm curious, have you talked with your child and actually asked them what it is that might get them feeling a certain way, or why do they believe that they're acting out? I've had situations where, and especially with my own kids, they don't really understand what's going on. They just know they have emotions, but they don't even know what the emotions are or what they're supposed to do with them. And so, sometimes that's us teaching them what they can do with those emotions. And so as an example, your child gets angry and you say the word rebellious. Like your child gets angry. We get angry too. So what do? Well, we yell, or, if you're not a yeller, maybe you slam doors, or, if you're a person who gets really angry and just, is very calm about it, well, I mean, bless you. But, we have to teach them ways of dealing with their emotions. And us as adults have problems dealing with our emotions, let alone, doing it for a child who's 5 years old, who's just kind of coming into this world and understanding what's going on. So I really implore you to, if that's a word, I really think to be empathetic, to look at it from the child's perspective, so that when they are being rebellious, you can kind of be curious and ask the question like, all right, what's going on? Why is my child upset right now? What is it that I can, help with and coach them with, so that they can get through whatever the emotions are that they're feeling. All right. Coach Fallon, good to meet you. What do you recommend fathers do when they aren't still in a relationship with the mother, but the baby is coming soon. Well, I have not been in this situation. I can tell you maybe what I would hope I would do. Like I said, when I give advice, I like to be like to come from experience, or I can say, here's what I may do in that situation. Um, the child is 50% yours, and the child needs a father, or I should say, the child deserves to have a father. And in situations like this, it can be very, very difficult, especially if you don't have a relationship with the mother. If you are friendly and cordial towards each other, that obviously would make it easier. If you're adversary, that can be a problem. What I would say is think about it, completely from the child's perspective, not from yours, not from hers, but from the child's. And imagine that there is this child that doesn't have a father and is coming into this world without a father. And so for me, and what I could imagine, as difficult as that can be, you have the responsibility to be there for that child. And that is a tough thing. It's easier said than done. It's, easy for me to talk about it, but when you're in that situation, it's not easy. As the baby's coming soon, I think, depending on your relationship with the person, but is to be there and say, listen, I understand we're not working, we're not together, but I want to be there for this child and be a father. And it's not for you. It's not for, for her. It's really for that child. That child is 50% yours. So, it is frustrating to see so many men give up or not be a part of their children's lives. And, it would be hard to imagine now. And I mean, of course, I'm with my wife currently, but even in that case of like having the children and not being a part of their lives. Now that's me. For other people, it's not as big of a deal, and they don't feel the connection to the child. But in any case, that child is still half yours. So, I hope, there can be some relationship that's established in helping out. Hey, Jay. Hey, Hadan. So Hadan asked, what's the best way to cope with being away from your children? I work for the railroad and I'm in training for 3 weeks and I miss them so much. Well, I mean, can you do can you do a FaceTime or a Zoom meetings or something like that? Maybe you can write to them or, chat with them or do something. If you have no communication, then, maybe you can take some pictures, take some video, take something before you leave, or, what you have and try to remember that. The thing with something like this is that it's not forever, and it's good that you're missing them. It'll make you probably value the time that you do have with them, that it'll make it that much more valuable. So, what I will say is just enjoy the time that you do have and try to make the best of it, because, you realize that, like, science is limited, or science. I'm looking at a person's name. That time is limited. That's the problem with these chats. I love it, but now I've got 2 screens going on. I've got chats coming up and down, and like I get distracted. I have got my attention just goes all over the place. But I'm trying to get to questions here. Jay, I totally understand. Said your wife's 4 months pregnant, and sometimes, she. It's funny. People want to go live with me, and that's I can't do that. She has zero logic. Yeah, well, hormones are not about logic. Hormones are based on emotion and our physiology. So, yeah, don't argue with hormones. That's for sure. Okay, Aaron, 8-year-old girl and 4-year-old boy, still can't get them to get along. 97% of the time they're fighting. I've given you advice before, so what would you do to get them along more? Aaron, I maybe did I give you advice around this topic? Sibling rivalry is a big thing. And what I would suggest is obviously having individual conversations with each of the children separately, and ask them, what is it about their sibling that they have difficulty with, or it frustrates them, or not. If they can articulate it, the 8-year-old might be able to articulate it a little bit better. It's going to be something along the lines of, you pay more attention to them, they're annoying, something, and they may not understand it. The one thing I will say is make sure that you are listening to them, even if you don't agree with it. Even just listen and don't even interrupt. Just listen to them and hear what they have to say. And I think what happens just there is that your child then will understand that, you're listening, you have empathy. But I think it's getting to the root of the problem. And oftentimes, you might find that they are treated a little bit differently. As an example, the 8-year-old, often this happens. The older one is often given the project, or given the job of taking care of the younger one. And truthfully, like, is that fair? Oh, hey, make sure your sister doesn't do this, or watch and go make sure your brother doesn't do this. And that's a responsibility that, like, well, the younger one doesn't have to do that. The younger one just gets to do whatever they want. So you do have to look at how they are treated. Yes, they're in the same family, but they are treated differently. I know when we had my children, my son was 5, my daughter's 3, and we would teach things to my son. Let's say it's something around eating, like using a knife or something. And my daughter would learn it early just because she's there. And so she learned things at a different pace, and she was exposed to things at a different pace. And so while we say, hey, they grew up in the same family, we treated them the same, we don't. And so that's one thing. The other thing I would say, and this worked for us too, is do things with them individually. Because a lot of times it's attention, it's just feeling like they matter and they're important, and so do things with them individually rather than together all the time. So, like, maybe it's on a weekend, or if you have a day off or something, take your son somewhere and go do something, or take your daughter, and maybe then that's a good time to have those conversations. Have the conversation about your sibling, and hey, what's going on? What is it about your sister that bothers you? Or when are the times that you notice that you're getting frustrated with that? And so once you start to notice all those things, and I don't want to go too long with this, but the next thing is then how to handle that. And so, that goes into, we've got a lot of information on in the courses and stuff of, like, when you're in this situation, how do you handle this? So when your daughter gets angry, instead of throwing something at her brother, what else could she do? And asking her that question. Well, maybe she can hold her shirt really tight, or maybe she can learn deep breathing. For your son, same thing. And so there's not a simple answer in 2 seconds, but it's taking that process and really understanding what it is and getting to the bottom of why they are having that difficulty. Jealousy, the treatment, they have different jobs, responsibilities, just pressure, or they're just annoying. The little brother, that's a common thing. I was a little brother to both of my older sisters, and I was probably annoying too. Hopefully I'm still not, but it just happens, and that's part of it. And so you really just have to understand, those differences and what might be triggering them to get really frustrated. John says, in your experience, what's better for an upcoming 2-year-old with the holidays? Educational puzzle book toys or electronics like Leapfrog? Neither. Don't get them presents. Go out and experience something. That's my, you might not like that answer, but in my family, that's a little bit, we kind of focus on that stuff. We have focused on a little bit more of experiences and doing things together versus the actual gifts. Because if you're going to get a puzzle book, it's going to last about 2 months or a month, and then they're not going to be interested in it, especially at 2. And then the Leapfrog, you're going to have to keep spending money to get more stuff. And maybe they'll use it for 3 months or 6 months. They're great products, but I don't know. If you have a tons of money, then, it's probably not that big of a deal. But for most people, I think, especially when they are young, special gifts during the holidays, and hey, I can get a bunch of flack for this. People will argue it isn't about the gifts. We think that it is. I have a video I did about, like, presence versus presence. And, it's about that topic. We put so much emphasis on the gift. And even as a dad, what can I get my child, and feeling like that. And my opinion, I think it's the wrong message that we teach. It's focused on material things. It's focused on stuff. And in the end, it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't remember what I got back in the day. I remember the experiences I went on with my parents, because we have pictures of going on vacations, or, pictures of doing things where we got to experience something new, which now I've taken into my adulthood. So that's just mine. That's my 2 cents. A lot of people don't, Smitty says you've sent in 2 emails and you haven't gotten a response. What emails did you send in? Because if somebody didn't respond, I apologize, but what was it regarding? Let me know. I've got an assistant who reviews all the emails, but usually we're pretty good about getting back to people. I'll try. Let's see. Su nombre, everyone tells me to enjoy my time with our baby now that she's only 5 months old, but she's so demanding that sometimes I can't wait until she grows and starts going to school. Is that normal? Totally normal. It's not easy, I mean, that's part of it. And part of that is taking breaks, and having that time away. You just need, to understand that it does go fast, and it's hard sometimes to enjoy that present moment. But I just was watching a video of somebody else who was commenting about, the last bath that they got to have or give their child, or, the last time they walked their child to school, or the last time that they fed their child because their child, now eats by themselves. And like all of these lasts, and you don't realize how many of those there are, but there's a lot. And so, yeah, sometimes it's totally normal. Sometimes it's really hard to enjoy the present moment. I know it is. I admit it. When I had my son, especially, their first child, I can't wait until he can walk. I can't wait till we could go ride bikes together. I can't wait till we can do this. And, or I can show him, I like to exercise and lift weights. And now I get to go to the gym with my son, and it is fun. But yeah, you just experience those different things. And, looking back, those are great moments. I wish I probably would have been more in the present moment and enjoying those present moments rather than wishing. If your wishing is just because you want them to go to school so that you have some quiet time, totally get it. And that's normal. So regarding my kids never listening, was that an email or a post? I'm sorry. If you sent the email, I'm not sure where you sent it. If you sent it through the website, you can send it through the website if you sent an email, but I'm not sure where that email or where you did. But we're usually pretty good about responding to people. I try to. Ryan, what is something that you wish you would have learned sooner as a father? Wow, that's a great question. For sure, empathy. Of just being empathetic with my child is probably the number one tool that I use. It's the number one thing that has affected my parenting. And basically just looking at things from my child's perspective instead of just looking at everything from mine. My child would lose her shoes, or, my son would break something, or, all these events or things would happen. And I use my adult brain. And when I started learning to put myself in the place of my child and what's happening in this situation, I just started parenting better. My responses were better. I took more time and had more patience. When you think about it and you're like this 5-year-old who is, getting wrestled up and worked up, and you think about, okay, if I was a 5-year-old and I'm just getting upset all the time, like, this is really frustrating because my parents are not understanding why I'm getting upset. I keep on getting upset and my parents don't understand me. When you start to look at it from your child's perspective, you just parent differently, and it's the same thing in a relationship. When you look at the situation from your spouse or girlfriend, your, even coworkers or whatever, you start to look at things differently because we're so self-focused. We like about, okay, well, how does it affect me? What do I need to do? And if you take a step back, if you take a step back, you can really start to look at it from that child's perspective, and feeling it just changes. You'll respond to that crying child differently. The child that's whining, you realize like, okay, well, why are they whining here? Like, what's going on? What are they so upset at? And so I wish I would have learned that earlier. I mean, I did learn it, fairly well, but I just wish I would have learned it as a human earlier. Probably would have saved me some headache in past, business relationships and, personal relationships and everything else. Let's see. Those are great questions though, guys. Let me see if I can just want to make sure I'm covering people here on both platforms. Well, it's a pretty broad question, but I will try. What are your top recommendations for raising a healthy 16-month-old? Get plenty of sleep. That's you, not the. Take care of yourself. That's one of my top recommendations. In other words, it's really hard, especially when they're 1, 2, 3, that you really have to take care of yourself. And this is a lot of what I speak about in my courses and just in Dad University, that you really need to take care of yourself. And that means different things for different people. But like for me, as an example, I have to get decent amount of sleep. I eat really well. I've got to exercise. These are things for me that are just non-negotiable. And if it gets in the way, that's why I wake up really early in the morning, because it was going to get in the way of me helping out with my kids and doing things. So I've got to get up earlier, and that may be the case. That is, as a result, I get a little bit less sleep, but you have to prioritize. And so my top recommendations for raising the healthy child is to make sure that you are healthy. There's tons of like little antidotes about, doing things for your kids, but I don't think you can do any of that unless you are healthy. And, the saying is kind of cheesy, but it's like, on an airplane, you put on, your mask first before you put the mask on your child. And the reason you do that is because you've got to be okay before you can help somebody else. So that to me is the biggest one. And I got a little fireball. Thank you. I love those little fireballs and things. Let's see what else we got going on. Great questions today, though. Appreciate that. It's always great when you got good questions. So what is the best book that Ryan asked? What's the best book you read for being the best parent? I didn't read a lot of books early on, prior to being a parent. And now it's like I read a lot of like little research things and articles and such. Very rarely do I have the opportunity or such to read an entire book, especially from front to back. In any case, I do have some audiobooks, but The Joy of Parenting from Susie, my mentor, she's incredible. Early on when you're talking about a baby, Armin Brott is a great author, has a lot of, good books. But books aren't necessarily always my thing. I like watching videos. I like listening. I'm more of a listener than a reader. So I don't know that I can necessarily recommend any great. I haven't. The Joy of Parenting is good. Redirecting Children's Behavior is really good. We got a few on the shelf, actually. Positive Discipline. Yeah, that was good. I did read a lot of that. There's this one, Positive Discipline. Here's Armin Brott's The New Father. What else? Yeah, I'm going to look on these shelves here. More Positive Discipline books. Yeah, those are mostly where, a lot of the information of positive parenting, has been great, and I've, Jane Nelson was the author of this, and, this one is Positive Discipline for Teens, but there's the other one. I have an interview with Dr. Jane Nelson on YouTube. And it was just awesome meeting her. She's really, really good. And she's the creator of Positive Discipline. And she's awesome. I don't even know her age now, but she's been doing this for so long. And she's just a wealth of information. So she actually reached out to me because she saw one of the videos that I did on Positive Discipline, or somebody had forwarded it to her, which was great. So, and she's in here in San Diego. And so she reached out to me, we had lunch, and it was an awesome experience. And then I got a chance to interview her. So, all right, let's see here. So there's some difficult or different stances on this. I can tell you what we did, and I don't know if it was the right thing, but Cowboy, how do you deal with a picky eater? I do have a video on picky eating on YouTube, where you can just look up Dad University Picky Eater. Do I feed him only what he likes? Well, no. I mean, if a picky eater, well, let me preface this. There are picky eaters who are picky eaters because of real sensitivities. Like, they may not like texture. The taste is actually really unpleasant for them. Smells, etc. And that can be common, where, a child actually does have like an adversary feeling to, and taste to those. A lot of times, the picky behavior or the picky eater is a learned behavior, and the child is picky because they can be, and they know they're going to get something, and so they'll do it. And so I think you have to figure that out. It's one thing, so we did that by kind of just saying, like, this is dinner, like, this is what it is. And if you're not hungry, then you're not hungry. And so we found out, at least with our kids, it was not taste, or not even taste, but it was not like a real sensitivity to something. So I don't want to discount the fact that there are real, like, there's allergy type things, and there are real situations in which a child, and I've heard of many where, like, a child will feel sick, even so they'll work themselves up. What we did is actually put a counter and a timer on it. And if they're not done, they're not done. And, this is a little bit, probably old school is in thinking. There might be, some newer ways to do it, but it didn't work for us. We basically would have a timer and say, you know what, dinner's 30 minutes and that's what it is. And if you don't eat it, then you don't eat it. And that's what's for dinner. So, when we were making dinner, we're not short order cooks. So we didn't make like 4 different meals for each person because they had different preferences. It's like, this is the dinner. You're going to eat this. If you don't want to eat it, then you don't have to eat it, but you're not having a snack and you're not having something else. A lot of times too, what I find is a child will have a snack, or the parent will give the child a snack right before or shortly before. And so the child's actually not that hungry. And so we're then kind of forcing them to eat. And I don't like that either. So you got to kind of know your kid, and maybe it's smaller portions. Maybe it's an element of the food that you're having. I think you got to test a couple different things. For example, you're having pasta with like meat and whatever, and they don't like all that. Well, then, yeah, I mean, can they have pasta with butter? If that's up to you, that they can do that, but they're still eating the pasta. So I think in some ways that you can, move, I don't say cater to the child liking certain things or disliking, but we also had a try or a no thank you bite, when they were really little, and it was basically for them to try it. And if they don't like it, then they can say no thank you, and they didn't eat it. But oftentimes, when they didn't snack, they didn't have a bunch of stuff before, they ate the food, and maybe they don't like it. I mean, my son to this day will eat whatever is on the table, and then he'll say, can we not make that again? And it's, at least that's the way of saying, that's like the more grown-up way. I mean, he's 14 now. The more grown-up way of saying, like, no, thank you. I'm going to take the no thank you bite. Like, he'll eat it and then is like, just no, let's not make this again. So Yeah, I mean, I think kids often when they're younger grow out of it. A lot of them do. And so you got to be patient with it. Picky eating can be tough, but check out that video. Bapjap, does it it's not a curveball. Looking back, does it get easier as kids grow up, or does it get harder going from teens to adulthood? Well, so mine are only teens. I have a 12 and 14. Here's what I can say. Physically, it is much easier. In other words, like the demand on my time or our time, the demand on like doing everything to try to help them and do that, that is definitely less because, I mean, they're very self-sufficient, and especially, when we focused on that of allowing them to do things for themselves and stuff, they're very self-sufficient individuals. The emotional part becomes a little bit more challenging as it relates to dealing with them. As it relates to like my own emotions, it was difficult when my children were young. I also didn't know as much. So that part is tough when they're young, of like understanding their like my own emotions and what I'm feeling and how to deal with this stuff. It's all brand new. So that's challenging. But as they get older, you're then dealing with different issues. You're dealing with, where they start to go through puberty, you start to deal with may start to like other people or have crushes, gossip and like friend issues. And so the challenges are still there. They're just different. And for me, those are like, I would dare say easier. Like that just comes easier for me. And maybe it's also that I've been doing this now more, but like, I mean, teens are just different, I mean, they've got their own challenges. They don't want to talk to you. They don't necessarily want to hang out with you. And that's normal, and so you learn how to navigate that a little better. And so, yeah, I think it does change. Ryan, you've got some great questions. What's my favorite thing about being a dad? I think it's seeing this gets me every time, is when you've taught something to your child, like over and over and over again, whatever it may be, and you've hammered it into them, and then you see them do it. And so an example might be, like when we get upset, I've come back and apologized. And I've said, listen, I handled this poorly. I could have done that differently. My children, I have now seen do that, where they yell, they get upset, they stomp out of the room, and then they'll come back and they'll be like, Dad, I really could have handled that better. And when you see that happen, where something that you tried really, really hard to do as a parent, to teach them something about the world and like how to function in the world, when you see them do that for themselves, to me, that's the best. It's not, I mean, I don't know. I don't, and I'm saying this and I really believe it. I don't care what they accomplish. Like, I just want them to be happy. So they get accolades and awards, and maybe I say that because I have kids that do well in school or are respectful, but my wife and I have worked really hard to do that. And so that's not, I don't think it's by luck. I think it's by effort. Of course, there are some natured kids that just, are a certain way, but when you see them do something for themselves, that to me warms my heart. Like, you see that they got through an issue, or they overcame something, or they learned something new emotionally. Like that, to me, that's the best part about being a dad. And, that doesn't happen really as much until they're older. So when they're younger, it's all those things. It's just, I mean, I will say when, you come home, if you come home from work and they run towards you and hug you, that unconditional love is pretty darn good too. That was good. They don't do that anymore. Now from a distance, they just, they say, hello, hey Dad, what's up? Let's see. So I hope that answers the question. Trying to get some questions in here. Let's see. I'm a new dad. Quick Lem. I'm a new dad. 11 days. Right on. Turns out changing diapers is the easy part. That is correct. It's the mind reading at 3 a.m. trying to figure out what's wrong. That's the hard part. Yes, it is. And that's a lot of what I talk about. Oh, short plug too. Guys, if you're watching this or you're on and stuff, and you're not part of the membership of daduniversity.com, go to the website. You can sign up. It's pay what feels good. In other words, you can pay what you want. You can pay a lot, you can pay a little, but you get access to all the courses, all the videos, everything. So I invite you to go do that. That's my one plug. I'll probably do it again at the end. And it's been great. I appreciate everybody who's becoming members. We've got new people now from TikTok. Had been doing YouTube for so long, and now we're getting a good community on TikTok. So that's great. I'm releasing videos all the time. It's a very different thing. Oh, cool. Somebody said the video of you showing how to teach a kid to stop hitting helps so much. Thank you. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, the hard thing about TikTok, and it's the same thing with YouTube Shorts, is that so much of this stuff, to get it in a short amount of time, you want to show people what to do and to give them value, but it's really hard to give value in a short amount of time. And so for these platforms, as a creator, it's so much, I just give you some insight. It's so much easier to create the short form videos. A 30-second clip or a 45-second clip, I can just sit down and do it. Maybe it takes a couple times. Whereas, a 5 to 10 minute video takes hours to script, takes, recording, editing, all of it. It can be days if you do it in a certain way. And so that's something that is it's way different. And so it's really, really interesting to see this different dynamic of, long form videos versus short term. Getting back to the diapers, the burping, the feeding, the tactical stuff, that is the easiest. The mental things are very, very hard. Oh, thank you, Christopher. I appreciate it. Thank you for the love. It's the mental stuff that's tough. Like, at least that's what was for me. Like a lot of guys, and especially on YouTube, I get a lot of people who are worried about, changing diapers and feeding and burping and all these things that are very tactical. Whereas that's not, like, you do it a couple times, you're an expert. The tough stuff is the mindset, keeping the patience, understanding how to communicate with your children. And so it's the long-term things. Those are the tough stuff. And that's a lot of what I deal with, especially in the courses. So yeah, it is that mindfulness and being, being aware of that stuff is very hard. Brian asked, do I feel that technology has made parenting easier or harder? I notice families nowadays during dinner just have the phone out to keep the baby calm. Yeah, so when they're younger, it's easier. Because you can keep them occupied. And the young ones, of course, it's just easier. You put put a pad or iPad or something in front of them and they'll watch cartoons or whatever. We have a strict policy of no technology at the table. So when we're having family dinners, lunch, doesn't matter. If there is another person at the table with you, you do not have a device with you. And it's a pretty strict rule. And we catch each other all the time and say, hey, so yeah, I think when they're younger, it makes it easier. When they're older, I think technology has been very hard. I am not as much as I am on social channels, I am not a big proponent of social media. Now, I don't think it's social media's fault. I think it is, partly. Obviously they're really good at keeping us on there. But I think it's, our responsibility as parents to police it and to educate our children and to make sure they're safe, and to teach them about it, how to use it properly. And I will tell you that that's one of the most difficult things. My son, didn't get a phone until he was 13, which was really difficult, but we stuck with it. All his friends had phones. And then now that he's had a phone, he's still limited on what he's allowed to use and have. Hey, he's probably getting around it in some way, but we have the understanding of what we have the understanding about. We were just teaching him about the dangers of things and to use it responsibly. And then with my daughter, she's 12. She doesn't have a phone yet. She asks every day, but she doesn't have one. So somebody had asked how long I'd been on TikTok. So I had posted on TikTok for a long time of just old clips. Like I wasn't really doing anything specific for TikTok. We were just taking old clips because I have hundreds of videos on YouTube. And so I would just take a short clip, post it on TikTok, didn't think about it, and was like, well, this eventually was looking at the audience was growing, obviously. And so TikTok's only been about a month and a half now or something like that. It's not that long, maybe 2 months. I'm not sure. Where I actually have done things specific for TikTok. So I took some time to study TikTok, study what works, what doesn't work. And I'm still learning, but, and trying to post videos specific for TikTok and create videos in the way that TikTok likes them. The algorithm is interesting. If you know so much, or if you know about it and how it decides what works and what doesn't. Bottom line is you have to create content that your audience really likes. And some of my difficulty too with TikTok is that, I create content for dads, but, strict dad content that's not going viral. You talk about toddlers and toddler discipline and a toddler hitting or, biting or, something about a toddler, and that does really well. The problem is that is not all of what I do. And also too, there are people on TikTok who do that really well. And that's not really what I'm there for. I mean, I consider myself more of a dad expert, not a child expert. A lot of people who are in child development and psychology and psychiatrists and people that are really, really good at that. And they interact with thousands of children and they understand that. That's their deal. And so, of course, when I post something, I get a lot of criticism. The TikTok mob has been after me, and I've dealt with that. But, I like to talk about the things that I do and how I've done it. And, for me, I'm a recovering yeller, very impatient, aggressive and such. And just realizing that a lot of the ways that I was doing things wasn't working. And so I had to revamp for myself. And that's more of what I like to talk about. And so, in my courses, it's the fatherhood mindset, it's the communication, it's a lot of the things that I have done and I have overcome and I've evolved. And so I've been able to do that with my own kids. And so a lot of it is my journey. And that's the part that I really enjoy. The other stuff in the tactics, I'm guilty because it works. It gets people's attention. And, as a creator, you want people to see the material that you're doing. And, if I talk about empathy for dads and how important it is, guess what? Nobody watches that video. Or if I talk about gratitude, or, if I talk about how I was having difficulty in here and I did that, most of the time, that content just doesn't do well. It doesn't do well on YouTube and it doesn't do well on TikTok. And the reason it doesn't do well on YouTube is because people aren't searching for it. The reason it doesn't do well on TikTok is because it's not that entertaining and it's not that exciting and it's not controversial or emotional or anything like that. So, I'm a marketer. I've been an internet marketer for 25 years. And so I understand all of this stuff, which is a very interesting dynamic to have. So I look at analytics. I look at all the back end stuff of this. It just takes a lot of time, and it's, having a family, running a business, having a wife, 2 kids, a dog now, great dog. I'll have to show my dog at some point. Yeah, it's a lot, it's a lot. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. Sam, I'm about to be a first-time dad of a baby girl next week. How early is it okay to start taking babies outdoors or into public? That is totally up to you. I would check with your doctor and a pediatrician to make sure. I can tell you, we didn't Public is different than outside. I can tell you with my own children, we were at a neighbor's party the day after my daughter was born, and we brought her to that neighbor's party. That was our second child. Our first child, our son, not so much. I mean, we were probably a little bit, maybe it was like a week or 2 or 3 weeks. But yeah, that would be a question for a pediatrician or such. Because I think, there's different things depending on the health of the child too. I mean, if you have a really healthy child, there was no complications, it's probably not as big of a deal. But that would be the question for them. Let's see. Sunombre, how old is your child? 5 months. So if the child, okay, so here's the question. My wife and I are taking an 8-hour plane flight. Do you have any tips for a dad who feels like this is going to be the most stressful thing I've ever do? Yes. So the reason, I'm going to guess, because I had the same stress when we went from East Coast to West Coast with almost a little over 3-month-old. My wife was breastfeeding at the time. And so she ended up, basically, our child was on her breast most of the flight. And just, that's what she did. Now, if the child's not breastfeeding or is older or, whatever, I think you said 5 months in the previous thing, if they're old enough to chew, maybe like even like a lollipop or raisins or something to chew on, because their ears might be bothered. But you bring little toys. Now, this is where I was getting to. The reason that you have the stress, I'm going to guess, because this is the stress that I had, was that a baby crying on a plane is just, we don't like it. Or you don't think that people like it and that people are going to get upset. And then as well, it's like you have to entertain this baby for hours. So the one thing I would say, you have to figure out what works best for you and the timing. We did it so that it wasn't the witching hour. It was actually the time where my child was, some people think they're going to do it when the child goes to sleep, and that may work for them. That doesn't always work. We did it when I remember when my son was like at his best, like where he's happy. That's early morning. He's excited about everything. And so we just did it at that time. But the reality is he ended up being on breastfeeding the whole time. So I think that's some of the advice, but bring entertainment, bring snacks, and just, be ready, get up every, half hour or so, just get up and walk the plane. Nobody really cares. Usually they're, oh, what a cute baby, or, people, especially people who have had kids, they don't care. They know it's really hard. And so you walk up and down the plane, up and down the aisle, as long as you're allowed to. Usually that's pretty good. I recently, I want to say, I don't know for sure. I thought he just did one, Dadverb. Another YouTuber, really, really good content, does product reviews. Andrew's a great guy. Make sure to check out his channel. You can tell him I sent you. I think he just did a special, like an episode about traveling with a child. And I didn't get a chance to see it, but I think I saw like the thumbnail come through. And because I think he traveled, either cross country or did something. And so he had some tips. He's great. Check out his channel. Let's see. Wow, there's a lot here now. Yeah, some other people have said snacks and new toys. Yeah, that's the other thing. Other people can help. They've gone through it. Definitely from experience. That's what we did. So, Jerry, this is a great question. My parent lives with us, and my toddler is spoiled by his grandparents. He usually gets his way with my parents, but throws a tantrum with us if we say no. How do I unspoil him as a dad? Well, there's very conflicting advice here. So, my mother, who is no longer, she passed away, was a relationship expert and also literally a child expert as well. She was really, really good. And I had that conversation with her because I felt I was pretty strict, especially when my children were young. And she had a conversation with me that said, listen, I'm not going to be around very long. And I know, and she was still good about some things, but spoiling, that's what grandparents did. And so we made it very clear that hey, these are the rules at my house. And there were some things that were just non-negotiable and we talked about it. But basically she said, listen, if your child comes to my house and knows that they're going to get ice cream and enjoys the fact that they're going to, have a piece of candy, and she was asked about it. She's like, can't we just allow them to do that so that they have great memories of being with their grandparents? And I thought about it for a second because at first I'm like, no ice cream, no candy, we don't have sugar, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of just had to take a step back and say, because I knew she also wasn't going to be around for very long. She had cancer. So there was maybe a different situation. But I said, you know what? I've got to let some of that stuff go. So I think you have to have a talk with them. If there are non-negotiables, I think you make that clear, in some instances. At the other end is to have a talk with your toddler too and say, hey, you know what? That's something that you can have with grandpa, but when we're dealing with it, it's not. And maybe there is a separation. That usually will happen when the grandparent is just really unwilling. They want everything to just be wonderful and no tantrums, no nothing. And so, ideally, you have that conversation and say, hey, this is the way that we are going to do it. Would you be on board, to help in this situation and do this? Now, most grandparents won't do that. They're going to do it their way because they think that they've earned the right to do anything that they want. So I think you have to have that conversation with them first, see what the non-negotiables are. If you've already had those conversations, there isn't really a way to unspoil the child. They are the grandparents, and grandparents usually spoil the children. You may just have to think of it differently and think of it as you know what? This is the things that they get to do when they're with their grandparents, and try to appreciate them. The fact that your parents want to spend time with your child is great because a ton of people don't have that. So think about that too. Be grateful for it. And maybe just try to have a little bit different perspective and see if that helps. So, dark horse. When we're playing sports, how old is your son? My son gets emotional when he doesn't get his way. Do I ignore this? No. I think you have to address it. So at 7 years old. So here's some things, and we did this too, and my children were like this. Getting his way, he's probably seeing it, he sees it from his perspective, or if you can see it from his perspective. And so what you can say, I think in those moments, you want to be empathetic. The emotion often as fathers bothers us. I'm not saying this is your situation, but often is because we see it as weak, or we see it, that come on, just, a lot of dads will just say, toughen up, and that's usually some of the issue that we have. Not saying that's yours, but just that's a lot of the issue. It's we don't like seeing our children be overly emotional. So there's a couple different things going on here. One, teaching your child to certainly they are allowed to have their emotions, but figuring out how to address those emotions. So, and one of those ways is to be empathetic. So when your child, let's say they lose the match and they just get hysterical crying, you might be able to say, hey, oh, you know what? It is upsetting when you lose the match. I can see why you're upset. And then, sometimes that alone, that's just that you understand. You say, you know what? Hey, did you look at some of the things that you were doing that were good, and you did this and you did that, and overall it was a fun game. Did you have fun? Probably say no, but I think part of it is the the ability for us to help them regulate and move through their emotions. You don't want them to not have emotion. You don't want to ignore it. And you don't want them to just feel like their emotions are bad. So, I mean, that's what most men do is, especially as kids, like we're not allowed to have emotions, hey, rub some dirt on it. You're not tough enough, whatever. And so what happens is we end up not showing emotion. And then the people in our lives get upset because we don't show emotion. So, and we end up bottling everything up because we can't show our emotion. So I think part of it is working through it. And 7 is pretty common. Now, if it's really bad, in other words, like the anxiety and it lasts for a long time, I would say that you could probably then go and talk with somebody, a therapist or something. That really helped us in those situations because we were overwhelmed and kind of too close to the situation. And what ended up happening is a therapist showed us ways and showed my child ways to actually deal with those emotions. Even with me, I had all these techniques. I'm showing empathy. It didn't matter. My child was like just overly emotional to what I felt was comfortable or like, I don't want to say okay, but it was like, okay, the emotion's okay. Let's work through this. What are you feeling right now? Sort of, we did all of those techniques and they didn't seem to work. And so part of it was figuring out what was causing that much emotion. And, there's fear of failure. There's all kinds of stuff. There's judgment. There's a lot of emotion that can start happening at that age. Embarrassment of just around the other kids. So thank you, by the way, whoever sent that rose. That was very nice. I can't, sorry, the great Gambino. So I think part of it is making it acceptable for your child to have emotions and even talking about that when they're not in the heat of it and saying, hey, listen, I know when this happens, you get emotional. That's totally cool. I want you to be able to feel like that. Maybe you can tell me and say what's going on in that. What happens? What is it that you feel, during that time? And just that's part of it is making it open and talking about it. Just the fact that you're interested in it, you want to help them, that goes a long way rather than just like, hey, ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist, pretend they don't have emotion. There's going to be some difficulty if that continues. And especially as they get older, you don't want that. You don't want the stuffing of the emotion. You want them to be able to talk about it. So, wow, I'm sweating here under these lights. I've got lights going back and forth. I get into it. I appreciate it. So again, guys, if you have not checked out daduniversity.com, be sure to check that out. I appreciate every one of you. TikTok, YouTube, everybody. As I said, the membership, courses, videos, you pay what feels good. It's up to you to establish the price that you want to pay. It helps make videos. It helps make courses. It helps me be able to do these lives. And I appreciate that. And I know, not everybody realizes the behind the scenes things. And so what it is that, there's a lot of production, a lot of time, a lot of effort goes into these. And so, it is great when people support it and support what we're doing. It is very, very helpful. Very appreciated for those roses and the things that everybody is sending. That's very, very nice. This is something, it kind of started out as a passion project for me and, years ago, and that's evolved into something now that is just really, really important. It's, and so I appreciate every single one of you, and we will see you next time. We've got some more videos coming along the way. If there are topics that you really, really want to see or hear or learn about, comment, and I will make my best efforts to do that because I definitely enjoy the feedback. So everyone have a wonderful night, and we'll see you next time. Take care. And I will figure out how to do this.